For 13 years, Ethan had believed marriage was something you repaired, not something you abandoned. He had spent his career strengthening bridges, restoring aging structures, and making sure buildings survived storms. Somewhere along the way, he had failed to notice that the strongest relationship in his own life had been quietly collapsing. Ethan Brooks slammed the drawer shut so hard that the framed family photo on his office desk tipped forward and crashed face down onto the polished wood. He froze. The only sound in the 42nd floor office overlooking Charlotte was his own breathing. His hand tightened around a black fountain pen. On the desk, 26 pages waited inside a cream-colored folder. Petition for dissolution of marriage. One signature. That was all it would take. His phone vibrated. Natalie's name lit up the screen. Don't forget dinner at Monica's tomorrow at 7. Please come home early. He stared at the message. No heart emoji. No love you. Just another reminder. For months, that was all they had become. Reminders, schedules, groceries, bills, appointments. Nothing that sounded like two people who had once danced barefoot in their tiny apartment kitchen because the power had gone out during a thunderstorm. Ethan slowly placed the pen on the desk. One more day, he whispered to himself. He slid the divorce papers back into the drawer and locked it. He had no idea that within 24 hours, one conversation he wasn't supposed to hear would completely shatter everything he believed about his marriage. And before this story is over, you'll understand why one honest conversation can save a relationship that years of silence almost destroyed. Ethan Brooks wasn't the kind of man people noticed when he entered a room. He was 6'1", broad-shouldered from years of working construction sites before moving into management, with calm gray eyes that rarely revealed what he was thinking. His coworkers trusted him because he never panicked. His clients respected him because he always kept his word. But somewhere over the last 3 years, the people who admired his reliability had begun receiving more of him than the woman who had promised to spend her life beside him. Natalie Brooks had once joked that she married the only man in North Carolina who could get excited over concrete. You know what's romantic? She'd teased one evening years earlier. Ethan looked up from a blueprint. What? You? He laughed. I don't think anyone has ever used romantic and reinforced concrete in the same sentence. She walked over, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed his forehead. I wasn't talking about the concrete. That memory felt like another lifetime. Now their conversation sounded different. Did you pay the electric bill? Yes. Your doctor's appointment is Thursday. I know. I'm working late. Okay. And nothing was wrong enough to start a fight, but nothing was right enough to feel like a marriage. The silence had become a roommate living between them. Every morning, Natalie left for her interior design studio before Ethan woke up. Every evening, Ethan came home after Natalie had already eaten. Weekends became catch-up days. Laundry, groceries, emails, sleep. One Saturday afternoon, Natalie stood in the kitchen holding 2 tickets. Ethan? He looked up from his laptop. Yeah? I bought tickets. For what? The jazz festival downtown. When? Tonight. He frowned. I forgot. Her smile faded. Forgot what? I promised Greg I'd review the site plans. You've been working every Saturday for 3 months. I know. We could go after. It'll probably be late. She looked at the tickets for several seconds before quietly placing them in the trash. It's okay. No, Natalie. It's fine. But it wasn't. He watched her leave the kitchen. He almost stood up, almost followed her. Instead, he opened another spreadsheet. That night, the tickets stayed in the garbage. Neither of them mentioned them again. Months later, Ethan wouldn't even remember the concert. Natalie would. Because sometimes the moments one person forgets become the moments another person never recovers from. 3 weeks before the divorce papers arrived, Ethan had worked until nearly midnight. When he finally walked into the house, every light downstairs was off except one candle burning on the dining table. Natalie was asleep on the couch. Beside her sat 2 untouched plates covered with foil. A small handwritten card rested next to his plate. Happy anniversary. I know you're busy. I waited as long as I could. I love you anyway. Natalie. He stood perfectly still, then looked at the calendar. October 12th, their anniversary. He had forgotten. His stomach twisted. Natalie? She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He carefully covered her with a blanket, picked up the card, read it again, then quietly went upstairs. The next morning, he intended to apologize. Instead, his phone rang before breakfast. A concrete supplier had delivered the wrong materials to a multi-million-dollar project. By the time he got home, Natalie was already asleep. The apology never came. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. One forgotten apology slowly turned into another brick in the invisible wall growing between them. Natalie wasn't perfect either. She stopped asking Ethan how work was going. She stopped waiting for him at dinner. She stopped reaching for his hand during movies. Sometimes she stared out the living room window for long stretches without saying a word. One rainy evening, Ethan finally asked, "Are you happy?" She looked surprised. "What?" "Us." She forced a smile. "Of course." You hesitated. "I was thinking." "About what?" "Nothing." "Natalie, I'm just tired." That answer ended the conversation, but not the question, because Ethan had started noticing something. She smiled differently around other people. At family gatherings, she laughed. At work events, she talked. Around friends, she looked alive. Only at home, she became quiet. One night, while brushing his teeth, he caught himself staring into the bathroom mirror. When did she stop looking at me like she used to? He couldn't answer. 6 months later, Natalie came home carrying a large shopping bag. "Ethan?" He was sitting at the dining table reviewing blueprints. "I found something." "What?" She pulled out a framed watercolor painting. It showed the little coffee shop where they'd had their first date. "I remembered they were selling these." He smiled politely. "It's nice." "Nice? I mean, it's beautiful. Do you remember what happened there?" He looked at the painting. "Coffee." She laughed sadly. "No." He searched his memory. You spilled your entire latte on yourself because you were so nervous." His face reddened. "Oh, you apologized 7 times. I probably did. You asked if I'd go out with you again before the first date had even ended." He smiled faintly. "I was afraid you'd say no." "I almost did." They both laughed. For one brief second, it felt like old times. Then Ethan's phone rang. "Greg." He glanced at the screen. "I have to take this." Natalie's smile disappeared. "Of course you do." He stepped outside. The call lasted 38 minutes. When he returned, the painting was hanging on the wall. Natalie had already gone upstairs. The next morning, he noticed something strange. The framed anniversary photo that had always sat beside Natalie's side of the bed was gone. He searched the bedroom. Nothing. He checked the closet. Nothing. Later that evening, he found it, wrapped carefully inside a storage box in the guest room. He stared at it for a long time, then quietly put it back exactly where he'd found it. Something inside him whispered, "She's already letting go." He never asked why she moved it. She never explained. And that became another conversation they didn't have, one among hundreds. Eventually, Ethan stopped trying to guess what Natalie was thinking. He convinced himself the answer no longer mattered. That's when he called a lawyer. By the end of the week, the divorce papers were ready. He told himself he wasn't ending the marriage because he had stopped loving Natalie. He was ending it because he believed she already had. The following evening, he drove home earlier than usual for Monica's dinner party. When he opened the front door, Natalie was standing in the hallway wearing a deep emerald dress he hadn't seen in years. She looked beautiful, almost breathtaking. She turned, surprised. "You're actually early. You asked me to be." For just a second, something softened in her eyes. "Thank you." It was the first sincere gratitude he'd heard from her in months. As they drove toward Monica's house through the glowing streets of Charlotte, neither of them spoke. Neither realized that before the night was over, one overheard conversation would expose the painful truth both had been too afraid to say aloud. And the unopened drawer in Ethan's office would suddenly become the least important secret either of them was carrying. Monica's home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in South Park, its warm lights spilling across the front lawn as guests laughed on the back patio. Soft jazz floated through the open windows, and the smell of grilled steak and rosemary drifted into the cool evening air. As Ethan parked the car, he glanced at Natalie. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "I'm fine." He knew that smile. It was the one she wore whenever she wanted a conversation to end before it began. Inside, Monica greeted them with a hug. "There you two are," she said cheerfully. "I was beginning to think Charlotte traffic had swallowed you." Ethan laughed politely. "It almost did." Monica hugged Natalie a little longer than usual. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." "And tired." Natalie chuckled softly. "That obvious?" "Only because I've known you for 15 years. The comment lingered in Ethan's mind. As the evening unfolded, 6 couples gathered around the long dining table. Conversation flowed easily. Vacation plans, college football, the rising cost of groceries. Someone joked about getting older. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Natalie. She barely touched her food. She answered questions with 1 or 2 words. Several times Ethan caught her staring into space before realizing someone had spoken to her. At one point, Monica leaned toward her. "You okay?" Natalie nodded too quickly. "Just a little tired." Again, tired. It had become her favorite hiding place. Ethan watched quietly. Something wasn't right. Halfway through dinner, Monica clinked her glass. "Okay, everyone, dessert is in the kitchen. Help yourselves." Guests stood and wandered into smaller conversations. Ethan excused himself. "I'll be right back." "Bathrooms down the hallway," Monica called. He nodded. The hallway was quiet compared to the laughter behind him. Family photographs lined the walls. Vacation pictures, birthday parties, graduations, evidence of years lived together. As Ethan reached the end of the hallway, he noticed a door slightly open. Monica's home office. He heard voices. Then, he heard Natalie crying. Not quiet tears. Not the kind someone politely wipes away. These were the broken sobs of someone who had been holding herself together for far too long. His feet stopped moving. He knew he should walk away. He even took 1 step. Then Monica spoke. "Natalie, sweetheart, please tell me what's going on." Several seconds passed. Then Natalie's voice trembled. "I don't think Ethan loves me anymore." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "I know he says all the right things when people ask about us," Natalie continued. "He pays every bill. He fixes everything in the house. He never forgets my birthday gifts." She laughed bitterly through tears. "But he forgot me." Ethan closed his eyes. Monica reached for her friend's hand. "What makes you believe that?" Natalie wiped her face. "Because I stopped being his wife and became another responsibility." Silence. Then she continued. "Do you know how many Friday nights I cooked his favorite meals?" Monica shook her head. "I lost count. I'd light candles. I'd set the table. I'd even wear those dresses he used to tell me he loved." Her voice cracked. "And every single time," she swallowed hard, "he'd kiss my forehead, say thank you, grab his laptop, and disappear into his office." Ethan leaned against the wall. His breathing became uneven. Every one of those nights came rushing back. He remembered the dinners. He remembered thanking her. He remembered working afterward. He had never once considered what it looked like from her side. Monica asked gently, "Did you ever tell him how that made you feel?" Natalie laughed sadly. "I tried." "When?" "I bought concert tickets. I planned weekend trips. I asked him if we could eat dinner together." "What happened?" "He always had another project." Another tear rolled down her cheek. "I finally stopped asking." Monica Seahead. "So why stay?" Natalie stared at the floor for several seconds before answering. "Because I still love him." Outside the office door, Ethan felt something inside him break. "I love him so much it hurts," Natalie whispered. "I've never wanted another man. I've never imagined another marriage. I've only wanted my husband back." Monica reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. "Then tell him." Natalie slowly shook her head. "I can't." "Why?" "Because if I have to ask someone to choose me, maybe they've already stopped choosing me." The words landed like stones. Ethan suddenly remembered dozens of little moments. The jazz tickets, the painting, the anniversary dinner, the quiet questions. Every single one had been Natalie reaching toward him. Every single one. And every time, he had mistaken her disappointment for patience. Monica hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else, isn't there?" Natalie looked away. After a long silence, she nodded. "There is." She took a shaky breath. "You remember Gavin Mercer?" Monica frowned. "The real estate developer?" "Yes." "The one who keeps sponsoring charity events?" Natalie nodded. "He started calling me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He said," Natalie whispered, "that I deserved someone who actually saw me." Monica remained silent. "He invited me to dinner. Twice. And?" I said no. Monica let out a quiet breath. "Good." Natalie nodded. "But," she looked ashamed. "I listened." "What do you mean?" "I listened to the compliments. I listened when he said I deserved better. I listened because," her voice almost disappeared, "because it had been so long since anyone looked at me like I mattered." Tears streamed down her face again. "I never wanted Gavin. I wanted Ethan. I just wanted Ethan to look at me the way he used to." Outside the office, Ethan lowered his head. His eyes burned. He wasn't angry. Not at Gavin. Not even at Natalie. He was angry at himself. He had spent 3 years working late to build what he believed was a better future. He had assumed she understood. He never told her why. He thought sacrifice spoke for itself. Instead, his silence had translated into indifference. Monica leaned closer. "Do you know what I think?" Natalie sniffled. "What?" "I think two stubborn people have spent 3 years trying to protect each other and accidentally convinced each other they weren't loved." Natalie cried harder. "I don't know how to fix this anymore." Monica smiled gently. "You stop guessing. You start talking. You tell him everything you told me." Natalie slowly nodded. "I hope it's not too late." Outside the office door, Ethan whispered to himself. "No." His voice cracked. "It isn't." He quietly stepped away before either woman could discover he had been there. Back at the dining room, he poured himself a glass of water. His hands shook so badly that a few drops spilled onto the tablecloth. One of the guests noticed. "You okay, Ethan?" He forced a smile. "Just tired." The same lie Natalie had been telling for months. 20 minutes later, everyone began saying their goodbyes. The drive home was painfully quiet. Streetlights swept across the windshield. Cars passed. Neither of them spoke. Ethan kept replaying every word he had overheard. Natalie stared out the passenger window, convinced nothing had changed. She had no idea that the man beside her had just discovered the truth that could either save their marriage or reveal how dangerously close they had come to losing it forever. If you've ever misunderstood someone you loved, or if someone has misunderstood you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. When they pulled into the driveway, Natalie quietly unbuckled her seatbelt. "I'm going to bed," she said softly. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. His hand instinctively brushed the inside pocket of his jacket, where the key to his office drawer rested. The drawer that held 26 unsigned pages. He watched Natalie walk toward the front door without looking back. Then he looked up at the dark windows of the house they had built a life in together. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about divorce. He was thinking about a single question that wouldn't leave him alone. What if the woman he was preparing to leave had been waiting all this time for him to fight for her instead? He followed her inside, knowing that before the night was over, he would have to make the hardest decision of his life, not whether to end his marriage, but whether he had the courage to tell his wife that he had almost given up on them. Ethan stood outside the bedroom door for nearly 5 minutes. His hand rested on the doorknob, but he couldn't make himself turn it. Inside, everything was quiet. He looked down the hallway toward his home office. The divorce papers were still locked inside the desk drawer. 26 pages. One signature. Just hours earlier, he had believed those papers represented the only future left. Now, they felt like a monument to everything he had misunderstood. He finally knocked. 2 soft taps. There was a pause. Then Natalie's voice came through the door. "Come in." She was sitting on the edge of the bed, already changed into an oversized sweatshirt, her makeup washed away. Her eyes were red. She looked surprised. "You need something?" Ethan closed the door behind him. His voice was unusually quiet. "We need to talk." Something in his expression made her heart sink. She slowly nodded. He remained standing for a few seconds before sitting across from her. "I heard your conversation tonight." Natalie froze. "What?" "At Monica's." Her face turned pale. The office door was open. She covered her mouth. "Oh my God. I wasn't trying to listen." "Ethan, I heard enough." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "I know." Silence settled between them. Then Ethan took a long breath. "I have something to tell you too." She looked at him nervously. "What is it?" He lowered his eyes. "Last week, I hired a lawyer." Natalie's entire body stiffened. "No. I had divorce papers drafted." A tear rolled down her cheek. "You? What?" "They're in my office. I almost signed them yesterday." She stared at him in complete disbelief. "So, all this time, you really were leaving me? I thought you'd already left me." The words hung in the room. Natalie began crying. Not loudly, just quietly. The kind of crying that comes when your worst fear has just been confirmed. Ethan moved closer. "I never stopped loving you." She looked up through tears. "Then why did you stop choosing me?" That question hit him harder than anything else she'd said. "I didn't think I had." "You did." "I worked. You disappeared. I was trying to build our future. You never told me. I thought you knew." "How could I know what you never said?" Neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan whispered, I thought love was something you proved. Natalie shook her head. And I needed to hear it. He reached for her hand. Very gently. She let him. I heard what you told Monica. Her eyes widened. Everything? Everything. I heard you say you still love me. She broke down completely. I never stopped. I know. I thought you stopped. I know. I heard you talking about Gavin. She immediately looked ashamed. I never loved him. I believe you. I never met him. I believe you. I just... She wiped her tears. Missed. Feeling noticed. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand now. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan stood. I'll be right back. He walked into his office, unlocked the drawer, picked up the divorce papers, returned to the bedroom. Natalie looked at the folder. So that's them? He nodded. She looked at the papers for several long seconds, then quietly asked, Is this goodbye? Ethan opened the folder, removed the pen clipped inside. Then, without saying a word, he tore the first page in half. Natalie gasped. He tore another, then another. Soon, dozens of pieces covered the bedroom floor. When the last page fell, he looked directly into her eyes. I'm done choosing silence. Natalie threw her arms around him. For the first time in what felt like years, they held each other without fear, without distance, without pretending. The following Monday, they scheduled marriage counseling. Their therapist, Dr. Rachel Bennett, listened more than she spoke. During the first session, she asked only one question. When did you both stop saying what you actually felt? Neither answered immediately. Eventually, Natalie smiled sadly. I don't even remember. Dr. Bennett nodded. Then that's where we begin. Week after week, they unpacked years of assumptions. Natalie admitted she believed Ethan's long work hours meant she no longer mattered. Ethan admitted every late night had been motivated by one goal, providing security, not escaping home. Then one afternoon, Dr. Bennett asked Ethan, Have you ever sacrificed anything significant for this marriage that Natalie doesn't know about? He hesitated, then reached into his briefcase. He handed Natalie an envelope. She opened it. Her eyes widened. This is my promotion offer. She continued reading. Regional vice president, almost double his salary, traveling across multiple states, 6 months every year away from home. She looked at the date. It was 6 weeks old. You declined it? Ethan nodded. I couldn't imagine trying to save us while living in hotels. Natalie's voice trembled. You gave this up? I chose us. She cried harder than she had during any therapy session. You never told me. I should have. Dr. Bennett smiled softly. This is what marriages survive on. Not perfection. Truth. Spring arrived. Slowly. Their laughter returned. Natalie started leaving handwritten notes in Ethan's lunch. He started leaving work before dinner twice every week. Friday nights became date nights again. Phones stayed off. Work stayed at work. Conversation returned. One evening, Natalie smiled across the dinner table. I miss this. So did I. No. She laughed. You miss spreadsheets. He laughed too. Maybe a little. She reached across the table. I missed my husband. He squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. 3 months later, Charlotte hosted its annual Builders for Hope charity gala. Hundreds of business leaders attended, including Gavin Mercer. He spotted Natalie near the balcony, walked confidently toward her. You look incredible. Thank you. You still have my number. I know. You deserve someone who puts you first. Natalie smiled politely. I already have him. Gavin frowned. I don't think you understand. No, she interrupted gently. I think you don't. She glanced across the ballroom. Ethan was speaking with coworkers. He looked over. Their eyes met. He smiled. She smiled back. Then she looked at Gavin. The man I married shows up every single day. He isn't perfect. Neither am I. But we stopped looking for greener grass and started watering our own. Several nearby guests overheard. Gavin realized the conversation was over. He quietly walked away. Ethan approached. You okay? Natalie nodded. More than okay. She slipped her hand into his. Let's go home. Almost a year later, construction was finally complete. Not on an office tower. Not on a shopping center. Their home. A modest white farmhouse just outside Charlotte. Designed together. Every window. Every room. Every detail. As the sun began setting, they stood on the back porch holding 2 glasses of sweet tea. Birds chirped in the distance. Natalie leaned against him. You know something? What? I almost threw away every letter you ever wrote me. He smiled. I'm glad you didn't. I almost gave up. So did I. She looked at him. What changed? He thought for a moment, then answered honestly. I finally listened. She rested her head on his shoulder, and I finally spoke. They stood quietly, watching the sky turn orange. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with one conversation that should have happened years earlier. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you love. You never know who needs a reminder that silence can wound a relationship, but honesty can heal it. And before you go, tell us in the comments. If you were in Ethan's shoes, would you have torn up the divorce papers, or would you have walked away? Because sometimes the strongest marriages aren't the ones that never crack. They're the ones where two imperfect people finally stop a sniffuse and start talking before it's too late.